What was it like fighting Bernard?
Ooh, fighting Bernard was totally different than what I expected.
From the unforgiving streets of Philadelphia's roughest neighborhood to the dazzling lights of the world's most prestigious boxing arenas, Bernard Hopkins' journey is nothing short of miraculous. Imagine a young man caught in the relentless grip of crime and violence, where each day is a fight for survival, and the future seems predetermined by the harsh realities of the streets. This was Hopkins' world, a world where hope was scarce, and the prospects of a better life were even scarcer. Arrested multiple times during his youth, his life took a drastic turn at 17 when he was sentenced to 18 years in Graterford Prison for armed robbery. In a place where despair reigned supreme and the walls seemed to close in with each passing day, most would succumb to the darkness. But not Bernard Hopkins. How does a man entrenched in such a bleak existence rise above it all to not only change his destiny, but to dominate an entire sport known for its grueling demands and fierce competition? How does a street fighter with a criminal record transform himself into a disciplined athlete, outsmarting and outperforming opponents who had every advantage over him? Bernard Hopkins wasn't just fighting other boxers. He was battling the very circumstances that sought to define him. Every punch he threw was against a past filled with mistakes and a society eager to write him off. He defied the odds stacked sky high against him into a legacy that would inspire millions. This is not just the story of a boxer. It's the extraordinary tale of a man who refused to be confined by his past, who saw the chance for a new beginning in the most unlikely of places, and who would go on to etch his name in the annals of sports history. So buckle up as we delve into the riveting life of Bernard Hopkins, the executioner, who didn't just beat the count, he reset the game. This is Bernard Hopkins, the street fighter, who conquered the world of professional boxing. Hopkins was born on January 15, 1965, into the gritty, unforgiving streets of North Philadelphia, a place where dreams were often overshadowed by the daily struggle for survival. In a neighborhood riddled with poverty, crime, and a sense of hopelessness, young Bernard quickly learned that toughness was more than just an attitude. It was a necessity. His family struggled to make ends meet, and the allure of the streets beckoned with the promise of quick money and respect that society seemed unwilling to grant. By the age of 13, Hopkins was already deeply entrenched in the perilous world of street life. He became involved with local gangs, viewing them as a surrogate family that provided the support and recognition he craved. Street fights became a regular occurrence, each one a brutal test of strength and willpower. These weren't schoolyard scuffles. They were raw, relentless battles where the stakes were high and the consequences could be dire. Bernard was fighting for his place in a world that seemed determined to overlook him. Petty thefts soon escalated into more serious crimes. The adrenaline rush from these risky endeavors offered a temporary escape from his reality, but pushed him further down a dangerous path. At 17, Hopkins was thrust into an environment even more ruthless than the streets he left behind. Inside the cold, oppressive walls of Graterford, the reality of his situation hit hard. Surrounded by hardened criminals and facing the prospect of spending his prime years locked away, Bernard was at a crossroads. Prison was a harsh world, governed by its own rules, where showing any sign of weakness could make you a target. Hopkins knew that to survive, he had to adapt quickly. Amidst the daily struggles, a glimmer of hope emerged. The prison had a boxing program, a small haven where inmates could channel their aggression and find a sense of purpose. Drawn to the familiar allure of fighting but seeking something more disciplined, Bernard decided to give it a try. Stepping into the makeshift ring for the first time, he felt an unexpected surge of clarity. Boxing was different from the chaotic brawls of his past. It required strategy, discipline, and a level of self-control he'd never exercised before. Under the guidance of the prison's boxing coach, Hopkins began to train in earnest. Every morning, he woke up with a renewed sense of determination. He studied the techniques of legendary fighters and pushed his body to its limits. The training regime provided a structure that his life had sorely lacked. Each jab was more than a physical movement. It was a step toward a future he was beginning to envision for himself. During this time, Hopkins also underwent a significant personal transformation. He embraced education, earning his GED, and delved into reading and self-improvement. He converted to Islam, finding solace and guidance in its teachings. This spiritual awakening helped him confront his past actions and solidify his commitment to change. He began to understand that true strength came not just from physical prowess, but from mental and moral fortitude. As his release date approached, earlier than expected due to good behavior, Hopkins made a solemn vow. He would never return to prison. But more than that, he resolved to dedicate his life to boxing, to harness the skills and discipline he had developed and make something of himself. It was an ambitious goal, especially for someone with a criminal record and no professional experience. But Bernard was undeterred. Bernard Hopkins was ready to step out of the darkness and into the ring, not just to fight opponents, but to fight for a new identity, a new legacy, and a new life. When Hopkins stepped out of prison, he was a changed man, but the boxing world didn't make it easy. Labeled as a felon, many doors were closed to him. The boxing community was skeptical. Could a man with his past truly make it in professional boxing? Hopkins was determined to prove that he was more than his mistakes. With every punch thrown and every round fought, he wasn't just battling his opponents. He was fighting the stigma that followed him. This was a fight for redemption. Bernard Hopkins made his debut on October 11, 1988, a date etched into his memory. Not for glory, but for the sting of defeat. Facing Clinton Mitchell at Resorts International in Atlantic City, Hopkins lost a close majority decision. For many boxers, a loss in their debut could shatter dreams and confidence. But for Hopkins, it was a pivotal moment, a harsh reminder that talent alone wasn't enough at this level. He didn't let this setback define him. Hopkins took it as a learning experience. He realized that while his street-fighting toughness gave him resilience, professional boxing demanded much more: technique, strategy, discipline, and an unyielding work ethic. Determined to transform himself, he took a 16-month hiatus from professional fights. This wasn't a period of rest. It was an intense phase of self-improvement and reinvention. During this time, Hopkins immersed himself in the sport. He studied the fighting styles of boxing legends like Sugar Ray Robinson, Marvin Hagler, and Roberto Duran. He analyzed their footwork, defensive maneuvers, and ring intelligence. Every day, he pushed his physical limits with grueling training sessions that included running long distances at dawn, intensive sparring rounds, and refining his punching technique. He focused on building not just his body, but also his mind, understanding that boxing is as much a mental game as it is physical. Hopkins also fine-tuned his lifestyle outside the ring. He embraced a Spartan way of living: strict diet, no alcohol, no late nights, understanding that sacrifices were necessary for greatness. His commitment was unwavering. He was not just preparing for his next fight, but for a career that he intended to be nothing short of extraordinary. When he returned to the ring on February 22, 1990, the transformation was evident. Hopkins faced Greg Page and secured his first professional victory with a technical knockout in the 4th round. This win sparked an incredible winning streak. Over the next few years, he amassed an impressive record, often dispatching opponents with a combination of skill, strategy, and relentless pressure. His street-honed toughness was now complemented by a tactical prowess that frustrated and overwhelmed his opponents. Hopkins' climb up the middleweight rankings was marked by a series of notable fights. He became known for his ability to neutralize his opponent's strengths while exploiting their weaknesses. His defensive skills were superb. He could slip punches with ease. Hopkins' greatest weapons were his ring intelligence and conditioning. He was always in peak physical shape, often outlasting opponents who underestimated his stamina. His fights frequently went into the later rounds, where his endurance and mental toughness gave him a distinct advantage. He turned boxing into a science, and he was the consummate scientist, always experimenting, always learning. In 1993, Hopkins earned his first shot at a world title against Roy Jones Jr. for the vacant IBF middleweight championship. Although he lost by unanimous decision, the experience was invaluable. Facing one of the best pound-for-pound fighters in the world, Hopkins held his own, proving he belonged at the elite level. This loss didn't deter him. Instead, it fueled his ambition even more. He continued to rack up victories, and in 1994 he faced Ecuadorian boxer Segundo Mercado for the IBF middleweight title. The fight ended in a draw, but Hopkins was unsatisfied with the outcome. In the rematch on April 29, 1995, he left no doubt, defeating Mercado by technical knockout in the 7th round. Bernard Hopkins was now a world champion, but for Hopkins, winning the title wasn't the end goal. It was just the beginning of a new chapter. He went on to defend his title, a record 20 times over the next decade. He unified the middleweight titles by defeating champions like Keith Holmes,
Bernard, the Executioner Hopkins,
William Joppy, and the previously undefeated Felix Trinidad in a historic tournament.
Oh, huge right hand! Huge right hand by Hopkins! Down goes Trinidad! He's got the desire! He's never been knocked out!
the undisputed middleweight champion of the world, Bernard.
He became a master of psychological warfare, often getting into his opponents' heads before they even stepped into the ring. His pre-fight antics and mind games were as strategic as his in-ring tactics. He understood that winning began long before the first bell rang. Hopkins wasn't merely accumulating victories, he was building a legacy. His career became a roadmap for longevity in a sport where athletes often burn out quickly. He fought well into his 40s, continually defying the odds and redefining what was possible in boxing. Each success brought him closer to his ultimate goal, not just to be a champion, but to be remembered as one of the greatest boxers of all time. In the end, Bernard Hopkins' ascent in the middleweight division wasn't just about the titles or the accolades. It was about a man who refused to be limited by his circumstances, who transformed every setback into a stepping stone, and whose fists told a story of unbreakable spirit and relentless determination. His journey from that initial defeat to becoming a dominant world champion is a powerful reminder that perseverance and hard work can turn even the most improbable dreams into reality. Critics, however, were relentless. They pointed to his age, claiming that at 36, his time at the top was limited. Young contenders were emerging, hungry to take his crown. But Hopkins thrived under skepticism. In 2004, he took on Oscar de la Hoya, one of boxing's biggest stars, in a highly anticipated showdown. With the WBO title on the line, Hopkins delivered a devastating body shot in the 9th round, knocking out de la Hoya and becoming the first boxer to hold all 4 major middleweight titles simultaneously. It was a historic achievement that silenced doubters and cemented his legacy. As he moved into his 40s, an age when most boxers have long retired, the whispers grew louder. They said he was too old, that the sport had evolved past him. But Hopkins saw age as just a number, not a limitation. He decided to move up to the light heavyweight division, seeking new challenges and defying conventional wisdom. In 2006, he faced Antonio Tarver, the reigning champion known for his power and agility. Hopkins, meticulous in his preparation, dominated the fight, winning by unanimous decision and claiming the IBO and the ring light heavyweight titles. Yet, he wasn't done making history. In 2011, at the age of 46, Hopkins challenged Jean Pascal for the WBC light heavyweight title. The bout was intense, with many expecting Hopkins to finally show signs of slowing down. Instead, he outboxed the younger champion, earning a unanimous decision and becoming the oldest boxer ever to win a world championship, a record he had previously lost but now reclaimed. Not satisfied, he broke his own record again in 2013 by defeating Tavoris Cloud for the IBF light heavyweight title at 48, and astonishingly, he pushed the boundaries even further in 2014 by unifying the IBF and WBA titles against Beibut Shumanov at 49. He transformed from the seasoned champion of the middleweights to an ageless wonder dominating the light heavyweight scene. His journey underscores a universal truth. No matter how daunting the challenges, perseverance and hard work can pave the way to greatness. In the end, Bernard Hopkins fought more than just opponents in the ring. He confronted and conquered the shadows of his past. His legacy is a beacon for anyone who's been told they're not good enough. Hopkins didn't just change his own life, he changed the narrative for what's possible, leaving an indelible impact on the sport and on the hearts of those who dare to believe in second chances.